In this video, I'll be reviewing Phrozen's brand new RPG Resin, which is resin primarily made for RPG games and miniatures and all of that stuff, so it fits very nicely with the channel. Now, full disclosure, they did send me this free of charge so I could try it out, and they have sponsored the channel in the past as well, so bear that in mind, but I will do my best to keep things nice and impartial and obviously unbiased. So popping it open, I was really excited to see what they could pull off because I've tested a lot of resins recently and they are getting better and better and better, easier to work with, more durable and everything else. So I had some pretty high expectations and a pretty high bench for them to actually pass. Now, the first thing I noticed with this resin is even before it got into like the heated enclosure, it was really runny and liquidy, which is always nice to see. It just tends to mean, I mean, it's purely anecdotal, it might mean absolutely nothing, but it always feels as though when it's nice and runny and liquidy, it's going to print better. And in this case, it did. So I poured it all into the vat and started getting some things printed off. And the first things I printed off were some of these orcs by Artisan Guild, as I'm going to be doing some of these for like teaching children how to paint. And they all came out really, really nicely, all bar one. And the one thing that I've noticed throughout my testing of this is that I needed to go from like my base settings that I've been using for the vast majority of resins and bump it up by about 20% exposure time. Now again, your mileage may vary depending on what type of machine you're using and stuff like that. It's all going to be affected by different conditions and stuff. But for me, like I mentioned, it was about 20% additional exposure time needed to get this to print nicely. Once I'd done the test prints and seen how they worked out, I printed some larger prints as well. And I had a couple of failures with that. And that's when I started to dial in my settings. And that's when I discovered that extra exposure time needed. It's kind of standard when it comes to ABS type resins. They can be a little bit more tricky to print with when you first start trying to dial in the settings, but once I got it to where I wanted it to, everything else printed off pretty much perfectly afterwards. So amongst those orcs, I printed off this big old T-Rex as well, because every orc needs a good T-Rex to ride. And then I printed off a whole bunch of other stuff. So I've got like this demon dragon bat, and I've got this big old dragon as well. So loads of stuff to print off there. All in all, the quality is fantastic. It looks absolutely amazing. I'm really, really happy with the way this has all turned out. And then of course I needed to test out whether or not things would fit together. So that's why I printed things like the big old T-Rex, because it comes off in multiple parts. So I wanted to see, is there any warping or weird issues? When you start getting into those more flexible type resins, sometimes you do see a bit more warping and stuff. So it's nice to figure that out. Now, fortunately with this, everything fit together pretty much perfectly. There was like no cleanup work needed. Everything just slotted the way it should do, which is a bonus. So I didn't experience any warping or any odd prints like warping in the print bed either. So print quality is great, but the vast majority of resins now are at that stage where they give amazing print quality. So what you want to know is if you are playing with all of your miniatures on the tabletop and you knock them off the table or somebody rage quits and flips over their table, will your miniatures break? So we're moving on to the durability bit. Now for this, I print off 15 of these demons by one-page rules. The reason I do that is because they've got like loads of tiny little pieces that hang off the edges. There's really thin sword, really thin tail. And basically, if anything's going to break, that's going to break. It's like the type of model that if you drop should break. So I print off 15 of these and I drop them from 3 different heights. So I drop 5 from the low height, 5 from the medium height, and 5 from the top height. And we see how many of them make it through to the end. Now, fortunately for this resin, all of them survived. So all 15 of the demons made it through. And that doesn't normally happen. You normally have at least like one will break when you get onto the top stage, but it didn't. And although this has happened with other resins in the past, it is rare, so it's really nice to see that it does live up to those claims that it will be more durable. And in fact, I've also got some B-roll here as well for you to see how flexible it is, and like bending some of the legs and the bits of the sword and the tail and stuff there. So you can get an idea of how flexible it is, so that way if somebody does kind of handle it roughly and it's not a drop or an impact and stuff, you can get a bit of a flavour there for how it performs. So it's all sunshines and roses with this resin, or so it would seem, but there are a couple of things that I dislike. The first one is the price, which retails at the moment, I've been able to find it online, between 50 and 60 pounds. So it is a more expensive resin. Up to you whether or not that's gonna be worth it for you. It's a really good quality resin, and in my opinion, it is worthwhile paying more to get a better quality resin that's also going to be durable. But your mileage may vary. There are other resins out there that aren't quite as durable as this or don't survive as well on my drop tests, but they are cheaper. So there's different trade-offs there for you to make. The other one as well is you always hear these stories about resin smelling bad, and you probably shouldn't be sniffing resin because that's not good for you. But unfortunately, it's one of those things that you sometimes encounter. This smell, like I've never really had an issue with smelly resin. I've only experienced it once with one resin, and that was kind of smelly. This is really smelly. Like it stinks to high heaven. I don't know what it is. It's like it proper smells chemically. And I'm guessing that's something to do with the mix and everything else that they've got there that makes it more durable. But oh my, it does smell. So just bear that in mind. Also as well, as I always do, I paint it up as well to see how it performs and takes paint. Again, I've still not had any resin that's not actually taken paint, and this worked perfectly fine with primers and everything else. Very nice to work on, and it just helps to bring out some of that quality as well. So all in all, it's a really nice resin to use. Once you dial in your settings and get it right, I didn't have any failures or anything like that. It was just nice, easy to work with, which is always nice because when you get into those more flexible resins, you do sometimes encounter more issues. I didn't necessarily have that, which is also nice to see. And of course, it's really durable, which is great. And it's a nice color, which probably means nothing because you can buy all of these in different colors and stuff. But it's a nice like bluey gray, quite similar to what you might get from some of the big games manufacturers out there, if you know what I mean. So that's it for my review for the Phrozen RPG resin. It's worthwhile checking out. Like I said, it is more pricey than some of the other resins out there, but you get the trade-off that your miniatures won't necessarily break. They should survive more of a drop, at least in my testing anyway. And overall, it's nice and easy to work with once you get those settings dialed in. So thanks so much to Phrozen for sending this over to me. Really impressed so far. And in all honesty, depending on the type of project I'm doing, it might be my go-to resin for little miniatures at least. Maybe not the big things because that will get expensive pretty quickly, but the little tiny things that are a bit more fragile, I'll probably be having a look at this in the future. So thanks so much for watching. If you've got any questions, throw them down in the comments below, and fingers crossed, I will see you in the next one. Bye.